Good afternoon, Yao.
Very good, Richard. Good to hear you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our session called Enhancing the Gender Impact of Land Operations in Africa. We'll share with you evidence on joint titling, complementary interventions, and social norms. This presentation, it's a joint session delivered by myself. I'm João Montalvão from the World Bank Africa Gender Innovation Lab, and my friend, Mr. Richard Oput from the Uganda Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. So what is the policy issue? What is the key question that brings us here today? The issue is that we do know that empowering women through stronger land rights reduces gender inequalities and enhances the incentives to engage in long-term productive investments on the land. But we also know that overturning existing cultural norms and power structures can be challenging. So this issue is particularly pressing in sub-Saharan Africa as countries in the region increasingly adopt land formalization reforms, often in the context of traditional, most often patriarchal, customary land tenure systems that tend to be historically biased against women. So there are basically two concerns, which is number one, is that without introducing accompanying measures, these policy efforts, these large-scale land registration reforms, they can formalize or even exacerbate existing gender gaps in land rights. The second concern is that in addition to land tenure insecurity, women face a myriad of other challenges, which if not addressed simultaneously, can hinder the full potential of strengthening their land rights. Okay? So the key question that we address today is that how can we enhance, how can we improve the new ongoing land operations in Africa so that they have a bigger gender impact? So at the Gender Innovation Lab, where I work, we've been conducting rigorous impact evaluations of land registration programs in partnership with governments as well as local organizations to help answer this question. Today, what we'll do is the following. First, I will present evidence from ongoing research projects in Uganda and Mozambique. And then Richard will offer a discussion, some reflections on the scaling up and policy implications of this evidence. Okay, so the plan is I will talk for between 20 and 30 minutes, and then Richard will talk for about 10 minutes, and then there will be 10, 15 minutes of questions and answers from the audience. So we expect that, just so you can plan your day, that this session will last for approximately 1 hour. Okay. Feel free to if you have pressing questions, you should feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, we'll have, as I said, at the end of the call of Richard's remarks, we will have time to engage in a discussion. Okay, perfect. So let me start by sharing the evidence from a study that we've been conducting in Uganda for a long time, and Richard has been our partner in crime in this study from day one. So there we conducting these experiments in very close partnership with the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, as well as the local organization that I know some of you here know very well, Associates Research Trust. So the experiment took place in the context of a land formalization intervention. So basically, we were in the field. We had a sample of hundreds of villages, and within each village, we were working with a sample of households, a random sample of households. And what we were doing, we were going to these villages, we were going to these households, and we were offering them a freehold land title for a parcel of land, free of charge. Okay, and our goal with these studies, we wanted to see what could work to ensure that married couples, our sample was just married couples, would include the woman's name on the title as co-owners of the lands together with their husbands. Okay, so our concern is that if you're not to do anything, most of the households will exclude the wife's names from the titles. So it's an hypothesis, and then the data showed us something a little different, but that was the concern. That was the policy concern. So we specifically tested three strategies. Okay. So the first strategy, we wanted to ensure that women had a seat at the decision table. Okay. So the idea is that if the decision will be entirely taken by men, we run the risk that women's names will not be on the titles. So we wanted to make sure that from the very early interactions that we had with the household, from the first day we went there, we knocked on their door, we wanted to make sure, we wanted to see what would be the impact of ensuring that the wife was present. Okay, so to answer this question, we had two variations of the intervention. In the first variation, we just went there, we knocked on the door, and we asked to talk with the household head. I mean, women were not excluded, but they were not explicitly requested to be part of the intervention. Okay, and the other another variation of the program in a different set of villages, what we did is we knocked on the door and they said, we want to speak both with the husband and the wife. This conversation cannot proceed if the wife is not present. If she's not present today, we'll come back tomorrow when she's available. Okay, and we found that this worked in the sense that women's participation in discussion was much higher in the latter set of villages where we requested her participation. In the first group of villages where we did not request it, we still had about 20%, if I remember correctly, of households where the woman was present, but in the other villages, we have like 90-something%, almost 100%. Maybe there was one or two households where there was some issue, but the vast majority of the cases, the woman was present. So we basically were trying to simulate two alternative household decision-making environments, right? In the first one, we were trying somehow to proxy for patriarchy, where all household decisions are made by the men, okay? In the second environment, we were giving some power, some voice to the women. Probably not because of the existing power structures. Women were still not on pair with the husbands, but our hope is that by requiring her to be there, she would be able to influence the household take-up decisions. What do I mean by household take-up decisions? Basically two decisions. Number one, whether they accepted our land title offer. So this was a free of charge offer we were giving. So the first thing we wanted to see was whether they accept the land title or not. And second, conditional on accepting the title, we wanted to know if which names they would like to include on the title. Just the husband, just wife, the husband and the wife, other people. Okay? So that's strategy number one that we tried, giving women voice. The second strategy is to work directly with men on the other side of the gender divide. So what we're trying there, we're trying to educate and to persuade husbands that they too could gain from an improvement in their wife's stake in the land. Okay? So what we did is we offer two variations of the intervention. In the first variation, it was business as usual. We provide, very detailed information about the benefits of a land title, but we never emphasize explicitly the benefits for the family of including the wife's name on the title. We explain what are the consequences of having multiple people on the title because they need to know what that was, but we didn't try to advocate for women being on the title. So in the second variation here, we showed households a short video clip that we prepared with our partners Associates Research, trying to persuade families that including the women's names on the land title is a good thing for the women and for the household, most importantly. So, for example, a key message of the video was that giving strong land rights to married women is an instrument through which the land is kept for the children upon the husband's death, okay, instead of potentially being captured by other relatives. Again, let me emphasize, the area we are working in, Barara, is mostly patriarchal and patrilocal. So oftentimes what happens is that, you know this much better than me, of course, you know, upon marriage, the women usually move to the village of the husband, right? And, you know, if something goes wrong, the husband passes away or there's divorce, there's always the risk that women can be, you know, kicked out of the village. That can have dramatic implications on the well-being of the women and their children, because then they become also landless. So, you know, the video had essentially two parts. One part was a dramatized part where we had actors playing a couple that was discussing, you know, how to get a title, the benefits of including the woman's name on the title. And then the second part of the video was a group of real-life couples in the region that, you know, in the past had decided to obtain a joint land title. By a joint land title, I mean a title in both the husband and the wife's name, right? That's what I mean by a joint title. And that they agreed to share their experiences on camera, okay? So just for you to have an idea how this video looked like, let me show you some of those testimonies for you. Okay, so you got a sense of the content of the video. As I said, this was the segment of the video where that consisted of real life testimonies from couples in the from nearby villages. The first part, which was even longer, was as I said, these actors playing, discussing the benefits and implications of joint titling, and everyone in the sample got information about the implications of titling per se. Okay, so this video was just focused, or mostly focused, let me put it this way, on the benefits of including the wife's name on the title. Okay, so so that was the second strategy. So remember, the first strategy was to give women voice by requiring her to be present in the interaction. You know, avoid a situation where, you know, sometimes they go to the field, the organizations just talk with the household head, and most often is the man, so women get excluded from those interactions. So that was the first policy instrument we were trying. The second one was showing this video, right? And then the third option was to take the more traditional affirmative action route. So what I mean by this is that, again, we had two variations here of the intervention. For one set of villages, we didn't impose any condition. We said, look, if you want the title, that's great. You just need to tell me which names you want on the title. The second group of villages, what we did is, you want the title, that's great, but I can only give you a title if the wife's name is included on the title. Okay, so this was a conditional offer. We would only give the title for free if they were to include the wife's name on the title. Again, we're not forcing, right? They could say, I don't want a title, or I'll procure a title myself in the future. But we just wanted to see what would be the implications of requiring that condition. Because as you know, many large-scale land registration programs, they do have these quotas where they want a certain fraction of titles to be issued under women's names. So, you know, so oftentimes that requires making these offers conditional. So the concern that we could have here is that from a man's perspective, there is a trade-off here, right? On the one hand, there is the increase in land tenure security that is provided by a title. Right? The title is good news for me because it is securing my land from pressure from other households or other people. But by requiring that my wife's name was on the title, that could lead to a distribution of, that could affect the power dynamics within the household, right? We are empowering women, and you know, to the extent that there is some negotiation, some bargaining in the household, or I'll say how to share the resources and the incomes, that might change a little bit the dynamics, and the husband might not like that. So the question is this threat, this concern, sufficiently strong to dissuade men from titling altogether? Okay, so what did we find? From the pictures, you can already see that the results were very, very positive. You see here couples with the land certificates. It's very small here, but if you were to zoom, you could see both the husband and the wife's names on the land titles. But let me just show you. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on this picture. I'm going to explain what they are in words. But so if you focus on the very first bar, on the left, the first bar, what you have is the take-up decisions of husbands. So in situations where we only targeted husbands, in villages where we did not provide the information, we did not show the video, and we also didn't make any condition on the offer. Okay, so this is basically, we go to these households, we ask to talk with the household head, which overwhelmingly, the majority of the cases, it was just the husband. We didn't show any video. We just said, do you want a title, yes or no? Which names do you want to include on the title? And the area in red gives the share of husbands that accepted the title, but only included their own name on the title. Okay, you see that's about 40-something%, right? 45% to be more precise. The area in blue is the share of husbands that accepted the title and voluntarily, without being incentivized or nudged, decided to include the wife's name on the title. And that's about 50%. Okay, 45% solo titles in the husband's name only, 50% joint titles in both the husband and the wife's name. And then the gray area, which is just 5%, is the share of households, husbands in this case, that said, no, thank you, I don't want the title. So, I mean, is this a large share of joint titles, of gender equality land titling? Probably not. You still have 45% of households where, you know, we just issue titles under men's names. But this is not very different from what we found at baseline. At baseline, before the intervention, we did a survey and we asked who owns the different plots of land across households, and we get more or less the same percentage. Between 50 and 60% of the plots were owned by both the husband and the wife. So not very far from what the customary system would predict. Now, if you move to the second bar to the right, okay, those are the decision of couples. So households where we requested to talk both with the husband and the wife. But again, in villages where we didn't provide the video, we didn't show the video, and we didn't impose the conditionality. So they could choose which names to go on the title. As you can see, is that the area in red drops dramatically, okay? That is, the share of couples that that choose a title under their husband's name only goes down dramatically. And that's accompanied by both an increase in the blue area, which is the share of titles issued under both the woman and the husband's name, are also interesting, a slight increase in the share of couples that say, I don't want the title, okay? Why that is the case is interesting. It's somewhat of an open question. Why, when you have both partners, rejection rates go up a little bit, despite the increase in the share of joint titles? One hypothesis is that perhaps they could not reach an agreement on which names go on the title, and they said, no, thank you, we'll think about it, and then we'll make a decision later. And I'll move to the next slide, but I just want to show you the impact of showing information to the husband. Okay, showing the video to the husband, so that you compare the first bar with the third bar, okay, from your left, the first to the third. So the third bar shows again decisions made by husbands, but where we show the video. Before we ask, do you accept the title? Which name do you want to go on the title? We expose them to the video. And what we see is an effect that is almost somewhat, the pattern is somewhat similar to the impact of including the wife in the decision-making process. You see that there is a reduction in the red area, a large reduction in the red area, which is basically a reduction in the share of titles issued under the man's name only. And you see a large increase in the share of titles that are jointly issued under the husband and the wife's names. Interestingly, there, again, it's just the husbands deciding. We don't see an increase in the rejection rates. So let me just summarize these results quickly. So basically, you know, the video was so powerful when shown to the husband. So we conclude that, you know, men's demand for gender equality is not as fixed as one would think. It's actually highly malleable. And we can shape it. So what we find is that when intervention is targeted to husbands, only about half choose to have the wife's names on the title as joint owners of the land, while essentially the other half just puts their own name. But exposure to the video persuaded the majority of husbands to have their wife's names on the title. 73% instead of 50% did so. In contrast, when intervention is targeted to couples, most, about 68%, choose to add the wife's names on the titles, while only a few, 16%, exclude their names from the titles, and almost 16% opt out of titling altogether. So given this already higher demand for gender equality among the couples, exposing couples to the video did not do much more of a difference in terms of increasing the share of joint titles. This is not entirely surprising because, if we believe that requiring the women to be present helps them influence the decisions, we have reasons to believe that the women's beliefs about the benefits of joint titling were already likely more attuned, more in line with the issues salient in the video. So the video will not have as much as of an impact because the decision-making individuals are already more informed and are more attuned with the video, with the content of the video. I didn't show you before, but if we just go back quickly to this graph here, the bars on the right corner of this graph, where you don't see any red areas, those are the take-up decisions of husbands and couples in villages where we imposed the conditionality, where you said you can have the title, but only under the condition that the woman's name is on the title. And what I want you to extract from here is that, so compare, for example, the first bar, I don't know if you see my cursor, the first bar, which are the husband's decisions when the condition is not imposed, with the fifth bar, which are the husband's decisions when the conditionality is imposed. And what you see is that, of course, all the area in red goes to 0 because they were not, it was not possible to issue a solo title under the husband's name only. So all the titles that were issued were under both the husband and the wife's name. So it's this big blue area. But more importantly, we see a very, very small, almost no increase in the rejection rate. If you look at the gray area between the first and the fifth bar, that area is very, very similar. Statistically, they are indistinguishable from each other. So in other words, we don't see evidence that this affirmative action measure of requiring the title to include the wife's name led to some backlash in terms of reduced demand for titling altogether. So, according to our theory, it looks like husbands appear to be willing to trade off a reduction in their power within the household, let's say it that way, for an increase in land tenure security provided by a joint title. By the way, this result is very much in line with earlier research conducted in Tanzania in an urban setting by Daniel Ali and colleagues. They also, in an urban setting, they offer land titles conditional on the women's names to be on the titles, and they also did not find a reduction in demand. So all in all, the key message here is that these, as you can see for yourself, these are very simple and cost-effective strategies, policy modifications that can increase women's formal land rights. So, for example, just the video that we produced was really not very difficult, not very costly, and can be easily adapted and integrated in larger scale land registration programs. Making sure that informing men is just one step. You also need to make sure that women have a seat at the decision table for you to get the impacts you want in terms of gender equality. Okay. So of course, so this is great. We see great increases in large increases in demand for joint titling, but the natural question is, what are the downstream impacts of land titling, of joint land titling? Do women feel more secure as a result of having a land title? Do they start investing more on their land or channeling their efforts to more productive activities that now their land is secure, so they don't need to spend so much time on the land to lay their claim? They can now start engaging in other profitable activities. Or is tenure insecurity just one of a myriad of challenges that female farmers face, and that without also addressing those other challenges, strengthening their land rights has little or no effect? Right? This is still pretty much an open question. And I want really to emphasize this last point, which is the notion that women do face multiple constraints. So think about liquidity or access to inputs, okay? So in theory, if you give me a land title, and if land title really makes my land more secure, I should in theory have more incentives to invest on my land, right? Because the likelihood of me in the future being able to reap the rewards of this investment is higher, because there's less of a risk that the land will be expropriated, for example. So in theory, strengthening my land rights should increase my willingness to invest on the land. However, I might not have the liquidity that I need to make those investments, or I might not have access to markets for inputs. So the point here is that if you also don't tackle these other challenges, the impact of land titling, you might go a long way with land titling. Don't get me wrong, it's a very important thing to do. But in order to fully exploit the potential of land registration, we could conjecture that you might also need to address these other challenges that, in particular, women farmers face. Okay. So what's next in Uganda? So we did during these times we live in during COVID, we did a quick phone survey in our villages, in the sample villages, and what we find is that women in our sample that were assigned to the land title intervention, they report significantly higher levels of perceived land tenure security than women in a separate group of villages that we had in the study where we did not do any titling. So this is, of course, very encouraging, but what we're going to do next is we'll be collecting long-term follow-up survey data. So we're going to go back to these villages when the situation permits, and we'll be surveying these households, and we'll try to understand, okay, what are we doing differently now? Are you investing more on your land? What type of crops? Are you investing in cash crops? Are you investing in food crops? What type are you using fertilizer? Are you using pesticides? Are you engaging in other income generating activities outside the farm? What is the balance of power within the household, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to be measuring all these downstream potential impacts of land titling. In addition to that, because of this idea that there could be multiple constraints that women face, we will be overlaying the land titling intervention with a cash, where it is, with a cash grant intervention. So what it did is, to half of our villages, we also gave them the households in our sample, we gave them a cash grant so that they could invest wherever they want. It was an unconditional cash grant. And what we want to see is whether households that, in addition to the land titling, also receive the cash grant, they start investing much more on the land than households that just for whom we just gave the land titling. So we want to see whether the land titling and the cash grant, they interact with each other. They enhance the effectiveness of each other. Okay. So meanwhile, in Mozambique, on this topic of complementarities, and I'll be very brief here, I'm almost done with my presentation. But what we're doing there, we are conducting another impact evaluation in partnership with the Cadasta, which you know well, and the NGO NCBA Clusa. And the goal there is to examine whether formalizing and potentially expanding the land rights of women through titling increases their willingness to invest in the land. So you really want to tackle this question very, very precisely. So what I did is we had a sample of 435 women. To half of them, we gave them a land title. The other half, we did not. So they are a comparison group for the duration of the study. And then to both women with land titles and women without land titles, to half of each of these two groups of women, we offer them an input bundle at a subsidized price. Okay, so what we're really trying to understand is whether women to whom you give a land title, they are more likely to be willing to buy the bundle. Okay, so that will tell you that they are more willing to invest on the land. but of course they might face liquidity constraints. So the subsidized package of inputs will alleviate that liquidity constraint. So these are, pretty much new results. We are still analyzing them, but the preliminary evidence shows that having a land title does increase demand for the agricultural bundle, but only, and this is important, only for women who at baseline said that they had decision-making power over the management of the land, so, the farm management of the land. So we're talking about having a say on things like what and when to farm, what and when to harvest, okay? For those households where women take decisions on the farm, we do find that giving a land title significantly increases their demand for the agricultural bundle. Such pattern is not present for women who at baseline report that their husbands alone are responsible for decisions on farm management, which, as you know, are the majority. So why this is the case, we still don't know exactly, but this seems to suggest that pre-existing customary rules matter, right? So imposing women to be on the land title might not change per se the power dynamics within the households, something we have to study. So this is resonates with the well-known issue in land registration programs, is that they really need to take into account the customary rules that pre-exist in these communities. We'll keep analyzing these results and we'll be collecting more data to be able to fully interpret these patterns. But this leads me to my final question of the presentation, which is, but can we really shift or relax those customs, those social norms that are biased against women through policy? This is a critical question at a time where the customary systems are confronted or meet gender equal formal land laws and large-scale land formalization programs. So in another impact evaluation we are conducting in Mozambique you might know, the Mozland land registration project in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Mozambique, we're starting to shine some light on this question. So as part of the baseline survey for that impact evaluation, we conducted a poll in around 100 rural communities, okay? And what we found is that both men and women substantially underestimate the level of support for women owning land in their community. So about 80% of men privately support women owning land. So when we asked them in private, 80% of them said, yes, we support women owning land. However, they think that only around 45% of other men like them in the community are supportive of that, when the reality is that 80% of men support, not 45% of men support. So, to the extent that one of the reasons that men might be reluctant to share power and land rights with their women is, let's say, for fear of stigma from violating the norm in the community, our hypothesis is that if we go back to these communities and they reveal this information, we correct these misbeliefs. So basically, our plan is to go back to these communities and show, look, in reality, the level of support for women's land rights in our community is much, much higher than you all think. You want to see if that starts breaking, eroding the social norms around women owning land. And we'll do that just before the Mozland project offers these communities the opportunity to register their lands. So there will be a group of communities where we go there and we provide this information, and there will be a group of communities where we will not do that. So we'll compare the land titling decisions of both types of communities. So I'm finishing my presentation now. The ultimate goal of our research is to help inform policy design. So I now have the honor to introduce you to Mr. Richard Oput from the Uganda Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Oput has played a pivotal role in the implementation of Uganda's ongoing land rights formalization efforts. And from day one, Mr. Oput has supported our research and has been a champion of using rigorous evidence to inform policy change in Uganda. So, Richard, if you are ever so kind, you could offer your remarks now. Over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, João. Thanks also to the conference organizers. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today in my capacity as a technical advisor to the Uganda Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Project Ministry team. It is wonderful to see the fruits of our many years of collaboration with João and his colleagues at the Africa Gender Innovation Lab. The project team and the ministry were closely involved in this study from the start, nearly 7 years ago. I would like to structure my remarks today along 3 lines. First, I will provide some background information on Uganda's legal and policy framework around land and gender. Second, I will share some reflections on the study collaboration with the Africa Gender Innovation Lab, our contribution to this work, and how it informed our thinking within the systematic land adjudication and certification program under the Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Project and within the ministry. Finally, I will share the details on our new KEDEP operation, which is the KEDEP AF, additional funding, which is planning to adopt and scale the existing evidence that you just learned about from João. The project is particularly innovative in its efforts to bridge the gap between the legal and policy aims for gender equity, gender equality on paper, and implementation of this vision on the ground. To begin, it is important to note that this study took place against the backdrop of a policy conversation in Uganda around how to promote a more inclusive legal and policy framework for land. The 1995 Uganda Constitution provides equal land rights for men and women during marriage and its dissolution as well. And our 1998 Land Act and the subsequent amendments were rather progressive in their aims to strengthen women's property rights and promote gender equality. For example, the Land Act requires personal consent for any transactions with family land and strengthened the representation of women in land governance institutions. To build on this legal framework, our 2019 Uganda National Policy includes provisions that expressly seek to reduce inequality between men and women, including the provision of joint ownership of family land by spouses. The goal of the policy is to ensure efficient, equitable, and optimal utilization and management of Uganda's land resources for poverty reduction, wealth creation, and overall socio-economic development. While these laws and policies are of course important, the government of Uganda has also been taking steps to strengthen the implementation of these measures. Indeed, the Lands Ministry prepared its implementation action plan for the land policy in 2015. This detailed plan includes a robust set of measures to improve women's rights over and access to land, including the call to provide for joint or spousal co-ownership of family land and a matrimonial home. To further demonstrate our commitment to the issue, the minister worked with the UN Habitat and developed in 2018 a gender strategy for the implementation for the implementation action plan. The gender strategy drew on the lessons from the study that Zhao just discussed, and it provided more specifics on how to implement these policies. It also discussed the advantages that joint titling can afford a household, including the recognition of the economic contributions of all spouses, the protection of women in the event of a marriage breakdown, and the protection for the widow or widower after losing a spouse. This brings me to the study itself. As the coordinator of the land component of the Initial Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Project, the KEDEP, and the director for land management at the time, during the first phase of this study, I had the privilege of being a team member and advisor on this research effort. We had initially conceived the study to be an impact evaluation of our systematic land registration and certification program, known as SLAC, which I talked about, which aims to secure land rights, including for vulnerable groups, and increase productivity and socioeconomic development in the country. However, due to the timing of the SLAC implementation and the study, we were obliged to change course. The research team therefore decided to work with a local research partner in collaboration with the Lands Ministry to implement and test the impact of a sporadic titling intervention with households in the Western region. We knew that this pilot study, which began its field implementation phase in 2017, could be very useful for the policy discussion that I mentioned previously. From this experience, we learned a number of practical lessons. First, we realized earlier on that it was important that we in the ministry and the project team were included as equal partners in this endeavor. We did not want this to be a research effort where the knowledge was generated in Uganda but then exported without it ever being shared here. I think this session today makes clear that this was not the case. Indeed, we in the ministry have benefited from the learnings from this study. Second, we knew that the coordination was essential to ensuring the pilot study implementation did not get upended by the rollout of the large-scale KEDEP SLAC systematic land program, or vice versa. We kept one another appraised of implementation progress, and we ensured that the rollout of the SLAC did not affect the integrity of the study sample by, for example, making sure the SLAC did not cover the study villages. Third, we were obliged to give extra support to our land zonal office in Mbarara, which received a large volume of freehold title applications while this study was being rolled out. Our team at the ministry worked long hours to ensure that they could keep up with this added workload while verifying the accuracy of every title that they issued. I think the Gender Innovation Lab team appreciated this contribution, recognized that without them, the study likely would have faced significant delays. Here, I really want to thank specifically Mr. Kagoro, who is the new project coordinator for the KEDEP, and Nicholas, our M&E officer, who contributed a lot to this effort. We have also learned some very useful policy lessons from this study. The clearest one is that despite our initial expectations of low acceptance for the office, the Gender Innovation Lab pilot study demonstrates that household demand for joint land titling is high, especially when the offer is accompanied by information or conditions. We in the ministry were pleased to see that there was a high level of acceptance of the idea for joint titling, and we also appreciated the cost effectiveness of the approach. By simply providing information, something that is easily scalable, we could yield large gains in joint titling and contribute to the aims of our national land policy. Finally, we also took inspiration from edutainment approach of the video, which helped sensitize households and clarify the arguments for why having the husband and wife on the same title can be beneficial for the entire family. It was in this spirit that we set out to design the follow-on KEDEP operation, which is called the KEDEP AF, or additional funding, in line with the LSSP2 planning framework, which also conforms to the overarching national development plan. The KEDEP AF became effective in April 2021. The US $100 million project, of which US $55 million is for the land component, aims to boost competitiveness in Uganda through a number of measures, including the strengthened effectiveness of the land administration system. The project is also helping advance the implementation of the government policies and strategies on land that I outlined earlier. The first component of the project on land administration reform draws directly from the Gender Innovation Lab studies evidence on cost-effective ways to promote joint land titling. Since the project aims to be transformational, it will implement the evidence-based approaches from this study at a large scale. For example, in support of the ministry's gender strategy to ensure women's access to land, including joint titling, the project includes an ambitious target to issue at least 200,000 titles with women's names on them out of 500,000 in total through the systematic land adjudication and certification intervention. Building on the evidence that from Gender Innovation Lab, the project also places gender as a cross-cutting priority. It will integrate gender-related information into the community outreach campaigns at the parish and district levels, and will provide targeted subsidies to couples willing to jointly title their land. Outreach and community participatory activities will also make dedicated efforts to ensure women's participation and inclusion in their decision-making process. Finally, the project will include a capacity building aspect by revising the manuals and training curricula for the systematic land education and certification program to ensure all frontline staff are adequately informed and prepared for the implementation of joint titling. Despite the challenges posed by COVID-19, I'm confident that these activities will have a lasting impact on the socioeconomic welfare of our rural populations. In closing, I think this study findings would be useful for other countries aiming to strengthen the property rights of their citizens and promote gender equality. To me, they demonstrate that it is possible to have a win-win situation in which equality can lead to better economic outcomes for all. Thanks for your attention. Zhao, I look forward to any questions you may have. Zhao and I.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And I was curious specifically about, maybe I should say I'm from the Human Geography of University of Gothenburg in Sweden. I was specifically interested in a little bit more information about the Mozambican study. And I have like questions. One, since you have both patrilineal and matrilineal areas, I was a bit curious about if you had any regional differentiation in your study results in terms of looking at women's names on the titles, if there was any difference in that. And then, of course, I'm very interested to know whether you have any reports out yet, either on the study or on the impact evaluation on the Mozambican land project.
Perfect. Thanks, Margaret. That's a great question. Indeed, that's something we have. We are fortunate enough to have that. We need to explore that a little bit better, but there is variation in Mozambique across, even within the same province. You have communities not too far away from each other that are matrilineal and others are patrilineal. So in Mozambique, I talked about two studies. The first study, which is this smaller experiment that we are doing, where we offer the land title and then we give them the opportunity to buy an agricultural bundle. That's actually mostly from a matrilineal area, and it is therefore not entirely surprising that essentially all households accepted our land title offer conditional on the wife's name being on the title. So there we don't have much variation there in that study, but in the second one, which will be with the Mozland project, which will cover a much larger geographic area. There we already can see in the baseline survey that we have variation across communities in whether they are matrilineal and patrilineal or patrilineal. We still have to go there and introduce the interventions. So we don't know yet, and collect more data. We don't know yet what will be the differences, but that's certainly top of our research goal there. Jennifer Lischer. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Joel. How are you? I really liked. Thank you for you and Mike and Marcus and team for the presentation on Uganda and Mozambique. I'm just curious. You mentioned that in Mozambique's case, you were looking at. I think it was. I wasn't sure if it was. You said control of resources. I was just curious. Was that the parcel? They had to be a parcel manager, or was it simply inter-household control of resources? So was this somebody who was making decisions over the parcel itself and parcel manager acting similar to an owner who, in order to make the change in the input package, or something else?
Yeah. So what we found is at baseline, we have a sample of I think it's about 500 households or so, almost 600. And to every household, we went there and we did a survey. We collected lots of information about the household, lots of information about the wife, lots of information about the husband. And then we did a mapping of all the plots that the household has. And for each plot of land, we ask who's the manager of the plot. And we explain what manager is. We follow the standard LSMS ISA methodology, the surveys. Basically, by manager is the person that is responsible for a host of farming decisions, including what to plant, when to harvest, and things like that. And what we found is that for households where the wife was a decision maker according to that definition, either alone or jointly with the husband, most often is jointly with the husband. For those households where there is already ex ante power for the wife, we see that they are much more likely to, as a result of having the title, to buy the bundle. Eventually, we went there and we gave the bundle for free, but at the beginning, they thought they were going to buy it. So those households where the women already make decisions about farming decisions, for those households, we see this increase in the demand for the bundle. For the other households where those decisions are only taken by the husband, there we don't see. They are basically their demands, their willingness to buy the agricultural bundle is not sensitive to whether we gave them a land title or not. Why that is the case, we don't know exactly. There could be several theories. You could think that, well, for those households, now that we are imposing the wife to be on the title, what does that do to the husband's incentives? Because now it's sharing property right with the wife. So it's still a little bit unclear what would be their willingness to invest after we do this redistribution of property rights. So this is something we are still studying.
Yes, you almost answered my question now when you were trying to explain the last reaction. But
Okay.
still, I want to know that there are some households, like you said, where the women don't have decisions to make and they cannot make decisions. But in countries like Nigeria, where patriarchy is the order of the day, and most women, especially farmers, can't make decisions. Now, how do you what's the impact of women having their names on the title deeds or having access to land when actually it could just be that their names are on the land, but they are not having effective use or impact. It's not impacting on them because maybe at the domestic level, the man will use their chauvinistic acts to intimidate the woman. So even when they come out to the field or to meet the officers like you and the Ministry of Land, they'll just pretend to be on one page, but invariably and in practice, they are on different page. So how do you manage situations like that? And how do you empower women to not just have their names on the paper, on title deeds, but to have, but for the land possession or titles to impact their lives economically and impact their families also. So how do you manage that? How do you know that the men are not actually just using the women to get title to land? Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Amaka. That's really the, I tried to allude to that point during the presentation. That's really the key question that we have. You know, it's just a piece of paper. Does it really matter? And that's where we are with the research now. We want to investigate, want to ask that question. We'll be collecting follow-up survey data, and we'll be asking questions, again, who owns the parcel, who makes decisions on the parcel, and we're going to be collecting a large number of women's empowerment indicators. But let me just quickly note that the quick phone survey that we did in Uganda does show that the women that receive the land titles, they report substantially higher levels of land tenure security. Again, will that translate further downstream to other impacts, other outcomes? To be determined. But let me also tell you that in another study that I didn't mention today that was conducted in Uganda, that by the way, Jennifer Lisher knows very well that study. You know, this was a land registration program, and there what we found is that we saw that households that received intervention, they start engaging in profitable off-farm income-generating activities businesses. And those results, that pattern is especially concentrated among women. So there is evidence already suggesting that we are empowering women through these land titling interventions. Let's continue collecting this data. More research is needed, but we also know that land titling per se, even though it's a very important necessary step, might not be enough in some cases. You might need to supplement land registration interventions with other interventions. For example, you could offer entrepreneurship training to female farmers, or you can help them by giving them capital to invest either in or off the farm now that their land rights are more secure. So this is pretty much where the research is. This is the frontier of the research, and this is what we're trying to do, is precisely to answer that type of question. Freda.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My concern is around issues of sustainability. All these are good ideas. The idea of joint titling is good, but how can this be made affordable so that communities are able to take it outside government or CSO funded projects? Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. So that's probably more of a question that Richard might be able to explain better, but and I'll pass the word to Richard. But you know, essentially these large-scale land registration programs that are happening a little bit across different countries in Africa is trying to precisely simplify the process of obtaining a land titling and make it more affordable to communities. Richard, would you like to offer some thoughts on that?
Regarding sustainability of this, especially the programs, there will be interventions definitely by government to carry out this type of programs, but in a systematic manner, which is followed, we hope, with community participation in especially the activities where the community contributes in the process. The more difficult activities maybe will be in the mapping and so on, but there are some things we are trying out to ensure that even community mapping programs are included in this type of activities. However, what is key to this is, first of all, to ensure that there's a promoted government intervention, but of a systematic type, after which community participation is encouraged in all of the activities in which the community can contribute. And that's basically to ensure that the cost is quite affordable for everybody else.
Well, in this case, I wanted to thank everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session. This is all ongoing work and efforts to empower women and strengthen their land rights in Africa. We are all in this together. And I also wanted to thank very much Richard for his continued support and being a champion of our research and using our research to research in general, not just ours, of course, to improve policy design. Also wanted to thank all the co-authors involved in these studies, in particular my colleagues Michael O'Sullivan and Ludovica Kerki, because they are here. Just a shout out to them. And yeah, feel free to email us if you have any questions, and we look forward to stay in touch. Thanks so much.